Alright guys, what's going on? Hope everybody's out there staying high speed and accomplishing their goals, whatever they may be. Like I promised you guys before, I wanted to do my best to keep you guys updated with the potential significant increase for junior enlisted pay next year. And depending on when you're watching this, next year being 2025. I know this is an extremely important topic for a lot of you guys out there, especially with the way inflation has been for the last few years. Every dollar is like critical at this point. I totally get it and I feel you. And I know it's especially critical for the junior enlisted troops out there. You know, I remember even when inflation wasn't so bad back in the day when I was a junior enlisted soldier, you know, I was constantly in debt, constantly trying to figure out how I was going to supply for my family, and still had to be at work at least 6:30 to 1700 every single day, and that was like the minimum, right? So it was really tough. I definitely remember. I feel for you guys who are going through that now, so I'm on your side. I'm really trying my best to at least bring you the news so that you can anticipate what to expect in the future. And not only that, but hopefully just share a little insight and a little knowledge on how this process works, how, you know, the government decides to go about increasing pay for soldiers in the military at large, because I think that's really important too, because I think it gives us the reasoning and the ammunition to potentially make change at the individual level if it's possible to do so. So I really have been paying as close attention to the news as I possibly can. This article just came out a few days ago. Let's go ahead and get into it. I'll get you guys up to speed. So this article is from Military Times, came out September 9th. Decision on junior enlisted pay boost not expected until November. That kind of gives you the gist of what we're going to talk about right up front, but there's actually a lot of good background information in this article as well, so we'll get into it. A final decision by Congress on extra pay boost for junior enlisted troops in 2025 isn't likely to come until after the November elections, a key Senate lawmaker said Monday. So this article really garners information from an interview that was conducted with Senate Armed Services Committee Chairman Jack Reed. All right, so this is a representative from the Senate, and he kind of gives us the background information as to why they're having a hard time coming up with a compromise for the bill. He talks a little bit about the differences between the House and the Senate versions of the National Defense Authorization Act, and that is the bill that gets submitted to Congress and eventually up to the White House for signature that includes all the changes, the annual changes to national defense policies. And this is a must-pass bill. The National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, is a must-pass bill. They have to come to a compromise and they have to complete it every year. The Senate has a proposal for how they're going to increase troops' pay, and the House has another proposal. The House's version versus the Senate's version is completely and drastically different, okay? And that's really why they're having a hard time coming up with a compromise. They're both good. I would say one is a little better, monetarily speaking, than the other, but let's get into it and see what's going on. So first, let's look at the Senate's version of the NDA. What are they proposing as a military pay increase for 2025? Reed's committee in June approved language promising a 4.5 pay raise for all service members in 2025 with an extra 1% boost for troops ranked E3 and below. So 5.5% for E3 and below increase next year. That's pretty big, right? That's awesome. I think that's good language to have in an NDAA. For troops ranked E2 with less than 2 years of service, the pay boost will bring their annual base salary to almost $29,000, about $1,500 more than this year. So not too bad, right? You can tell they're really trying to come back and combat the changes that we've been seeing with inflation over the years in America, and you know, it's affecting the troops just as much as anybody else. It seems like what they're trying to do with military pay is just try to keep it on an even keel and at the rate of what inflation has been. I don't think it's quite been there yet. I think they're still working on it, but that's why we're getting these slightly higher pay raises than we've seen in recent years. So now let's look at the House's version. What are they proposing for increase of pay next year? But the House passed draft of the authorization bill is even more generous. Under that plan, troops ranked E4 and below would see pay raises up to 19.5%, bringing nearly every service member's base salary above $30,000 a year. All other troops, this is troops that are E5 and above, would see a 4.5% pay raise. So that's awesome, right? So junior enlisted troops, E4 and below, would see a 19.5% pay raise next year to their base pay. That is huge, enormous, right? So what's the issue? Why can't we just have 19.5%? Well, the White House gave us a clue to why they think this isn't a good idea and they're not going to approve it. Let's look at it. White House officials have said they oppose the idea, indicating the plan would lead to pay compression in some parts of the enlisted military pay table and should be delayed until full review of military compensation rules is completed next year. I think what they're talking about when they're referencing the military pay tables and compression is that if they were to give such a large increase to the junior enlisted troops, then there would be less incentive for like E4s to want to be promoted to E5 because the pay difference wouldn't be much of a difference at all. I'm pretty sure that's what we're getting at here with that sort of language. Not to say I agree with that thought process, but I definitely think that's what they're trying to say there with that language. If you're interpreting that differently, please let us know. Drop that in the comments, but I'm pretty sure that's what they're trying to say. If Congress were to approve the authorization bill with an additional pay raise for junior enlisted troops, lawmakers would also need to pass appropriations legislation to pay for it. The House's pay raise plan would cost more than $24 billion over the next 5 years, according to the Congressional Budget Office. So they're also looking at having issues with, okay, that's good and all. We want to pay 19.5% more to the junior enlisted troops, but how are we going to pay for it? That's a ton of money over not only next year, but the years following ahead. How are we going to continue to pay for that as a nation? I don't know about you guys, and I'm going to, stay politically unbiased in this instance, but I will say that $24 billion, although it does sound like a lot of money, I mean, is being spent very easily in different places, not only just for defense, but in other places in our government and around our country. What do you guys think? Is there anything in defense that we might be able to transfer that $24 billion over to the pay for military enlisted? Are there any programs or subsidies throughout our country that, might be better served getting rid of and giving to our junior enlisted troops? What do you guys think? But House appropriators have already signaled they support such a move and included the money in their draft of the defense budget bill. The Senate has not approved a formal draft of the authorization or appropriations bill yet. So it sounds like the House has already figured out where they're going to get that money from, and hopefully whatever that way is something that the Senate can agree on. It actually makes sense. The White House can agree on it, and that really gives us the biggest amount of hope for a 19.5% raise for the junior enlisted troops next year. I think there's still a good amount of hope for this to actually happen. It really just depends on how the House's version of the Appropriations Act reads and if it actually makes sense, and if we can draw enough support from the Senate, and if we can draw enough support from the White House in the end. Because at the end of the day, even if the whole of Congress come together and decide on that 19.5% to go forward with this new NDAA for 2025, it still has to go to the White House and get signed off by the president. And if the president doesn't like it, it just gets kicked back. The issue is likely to be settled sometime around Thanksgiving, just a few weeks before 2025 military pay raise is set to go into effect. The White House, and Senate have all signaled support for an across-the-board pay raise for at least 4.5% for all service members starting next January. If approved, that would be the third consecutive year of increases of more than 4% for troops and their families. So worst case scenario, we'll at least see a 4.5% increase for troops across the board for every pay scale. My personal opinion, I think that's great. I think they're working their way up to combat the effects of inflation that we've been seeing in recent years. I still think we're not quite there. I think it's kind of like a slow crawl to eventually get to where we need to be, but it is on the right track. I'm not trying to give anybody any outs or anything like that, but it's still good to see that we are being supported as military members, especially with our pay, right? That's extremely important. Worst case scenario, we see a 4.5% raise, which is still a better raise than we've seen in the past. Best case scenario, we get that 19.5% for the junior enlisted, who I know need it and definitely, without a doubt, deserve it. I wholeheartedly believe that. Again, I just go back to thinking about how it was for me when I was a junior enlisted service member, and I just remember being so stressed out about money. It caused so much stress with the family, and that was just the money aspect of being in the Army, right? I'm still in the Army, but back then it was a completely different story for me. It was like, money was probably 75% of the stress in my life, and I still had to worry about being a soldier, deploying, train, all the things that are coming with just being a soldier, especially a junior enlisted soldier, still had to stress about that. So I don't think that junior enlisted should have to stress out about money as much as they do. And that, honestly, I feel that way for troops across the board. We shouldn't have to worry about money as much as we do, because there's plenty of other things to stress out about. And I know service members, they make the decision, they sign the dotted line, they knew what they were getting themselves into, got it. But for service members to be that selfless and go in there and say, hey, I'm going to serve my nation no matter what. I've literally signed a contract to defend the Constitution of the United States. I think the least that we could do is make sure that they're monetarily compensated in a way that removes that side of stress from life as much as possible. It will always be there a little bit, but it shouldn't be a major stressor. But that's the update, guys. That's where we're at so far. I think we'll see a new update here pretty soon, at least like within the next month or two, or by Thanksgiving, like the article says. I really want to know what you guys think. I know there's a lot of people out there in the community that want to know what everybody else thinks. Please don't hesitate to drop your thoughts on this subject in the comments so that we can drive positive conversation. I like to use this platform to do that. I think it's important to drive different perspectives and opinions from multiple people so that we can come together and hopefully develop a good way forward, or at least a good understanding of what's actually happening. Because there's a lot of fake news out there, there's a lot of confusing news out there, and sometimes it's platforms like this with people like myself that are really just trying to give you the truth of the matter and are right there with you with all the feels that you have about topics like this. Hoping for the best. I'll keep you guys updated. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you like content like this. This channel is full of good content just like this. We talk about military news. I talk about military schools, how to be successful in your military career, and all things fitness, all right? So motivation, all that sort of stuff. Tons of good stuff on this channel, so don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Besides that, I've got nothing else for you, and I will see you on the next one.